Hey y'all, coming to you from Jacksonville, Florida. This is GovLove, a podcast about local government brought to you by engaging local government leaders. I'm Ben Kittelson, Senior Consultant at RefTelis and GovLove co-host. We've got a great episode for you today. We're going to be talking policing and recruitment in South Bend. But first, the best way to support GovLove is to become an ELGO member. Engaging local government leaders is a professional association engaging the brightest minds in local government. And now let me introduce today's guest. Lieutenant Kyle Dombrowski is a lieutenant for the South Bend Police Department, a position he's been in since 2018. He's currently the commander of the Strategic Focus Unit, Strategic Intel Office, and Crime Analysts and Real-Time Crime Center. He's been with the department for over 16 years, including 7 as a sergeant and 9 as a patrol officer. With that, welcome to GovLove, Lieutenant Dombrowski. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and looking forward to this experience and sharing what we're doing here in South Bend, Indiana.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it because I think some of what you guys are doing might be a model for other places that are dealing with some of the same struggles. So, but before we get into the meat of our conversation, we like to do a lightning round with our guests to get to know you a little better and let you warm up a little. So my first question for you, what book are you currently reading?
Not currently reading anything, but the kind of last book or books that I've read was 2 from Simon Sinek, Eaters Eat Last, and then, All About the Why. So those are the 2 most recent books that I've read.
Nice. Awesome. And what was the first concert that you went to?
Man, my first ever one. I think, I was young, not so young, but my first one, I'm a closet, metalhead. So it was Metallica, actually.
Awesome. I bet that's a fun concert in person.
Oh yeah, it was anything out there. Yeah. Traveled all over the country to go see them and other bands. So yeah, music's definitely a passion.
That's cool. Very cool. Next line of question for you. What was the last thing, movie, TV show that you watched?
Well, I finished season 1 and looking forward to start season 2, but Winning Time with the LA Lakers, So I think first season was pretty good and looking forward to season 2 on that one.
Very cool. Awesome. All right. And then my last lightning round question for you. Where do you go for inspiration?
I think just everything, I haven't been a fortunate career that I've had, being a supervisor, and kind of I've been able to do a lot of good things, in my career. But I think most importantly, I got a great family support, someone, girlfriend at home that, supports me and everything. And then 2, wonderful kids that, give me the inspiration. But I think it's just that cliche thing of taking that oath and taking it serious, especially for this job, kind of gives the inspiration.
Awesome. Well said. Well, that actually leads into one of my favorite questions to ask is how people kind of ended up in this career. Just so for you, how did you end up kind of in local government and in policing? What was your path to the role you're in today?
Well, I kind of had some family growing up in law enforcement, so I always kind of had that, I wouldn't say like that inside track with it. But I will tell you, I think growing up, school resource officers, whether it was at South Bend or, from our county area, that was a huge thing. And I know SROs have gotten a bad rap, or cops in schools. And I like to say that I'm totally against that agenda. And I think SROs play a huge role, not only community policing, but that juvenile and law enforcement relationship. But I think it's a huge thing all around, just being in the community, being in the schools. And I would have to say a lot of SROs growing up put me on that path to where I'm in today.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to think about it as a recruitment tool too. Like, hey, here's a career path you may not have thought about when you're a student,
Absolutely. And I guess that was one for me and many others that we have here at South Bend PD is, the SROs kind of put them on that path.
Yeah. Was there something maybe in the first couple of years of being an officer that made you be like, hey, I picked right, this is the career for me, or that made you stick with it? Because 16 years is a long time in the police department.
Yeah, I got lucky. I turned 21 and got hired on shortly after that. So, but I think it's just one of those things where you actually get to help people. Every day is different, whether, you're in patrol, investigations, doing specialty assignments. I think it's just you just never know what's going to come, that day at work. And you get to meet a lot of great people, but you actually get to help people. And I think that is deep down, whatever officer you ask, even the hardened ones. When you get to help somebody, I think you get that feeling that no other profession you can replicate that. So I think deep down, I think that's where it's at.
Yeah, yeah, well said. And just, so we have a sense of kind of, the department and your operations and the city of South Bend a little. Can you just, before we get into our kind of some of the nuts and bolts of recruitment and kind of your guys' prospect days, but can you give our listeners maybe a sense of the city of South Bend and the police department operations, maybe, just kind of at a high level, and then I don't know if there's anything kind of maybe unique about your policing environment that might be useful context as we talk about kind of recruitment efforts for y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, South MPD, we're always trying to, innovate, trying to always try something new to make us better, more efficient, more effective. And I think a huge thing is where our location's at. We're synonymous because we're right by, with the University of Notre Dame. So we have a rich history, in education and college area, but we're kind of in the central of everything. We got, Michigan, just 10 minutes, 15 minutes to the north of us. We're 2 hours east of Chicago, 2 hours from Indianapolis. And then, we have Ohio. So we're kind of in the middle of everything, what kind of draws everybody here. But in the same token, it draws some the criminal element as well. And this is where the police department working with the city has given us the tools and the resources to do what we need to. We're the fourth largest police department in Indiana. We're very aggressive, not only in our recruiting, but actually being proactive, crime analysis, data driven, intelligence led. And I think that what makes us apart from everybody else is, we give our officers, our men and women here every day, whether sworn or civilian, the tools they need to do the job. And it's fun, whether it's crime prevention, community oriented, investigating drugs and gangs, doing patrol work, investigations. I think that it's from top down and bottom up is pretty unique. A department where we almost take for granted what we actually do here. When we talk to other PDs or we visit them, we get that sense that we have it pretty good here, and
Yeah.
We want to take advantage of that.
Yeah. Well, I imagine policing in a college town has its own challenges, but also probably would be preferred maybe to some other communities out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're really not a college town, but this is where we get a great mix of everything. Over 100,000 population, and with when Notre Dame games happen, it's those weekends are pretty busy.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Well, and we're going to talk a lot about kind of recruitment and how you guys have changed your hiring process. But maybe before we get into that conversation, can you give a sense of maybe before these changes were made, what were maybe the challenges you guys were dealing with in terms of either vacancies or recruitment delays? Like, were you guys dealing with that kind of struggle of just like filling empty positions and filling vacancies within the department? Like, was that impacting operations before you kind of get into the solutions? I'm just curious what kind of problems you're facing. Cause I know from my perspective, working with cities kind of all across the country in my day job, like we see this everywhere, like police departments having a hard time kind of filling officer roles and replacing folks that leave. So I'm just curious kind of what the situation was in South Bend before you guys kind of got into changing your processes.
I'll just be honest. It was rough.
Yeah.
From being, budgeted around in, the mid 240s for, our size of our sworn officers, to going down just around 200.
Wow.
It made operations pretty rough, from our patrol division, our investigative bureau, to our operations, and a bunch of our specialty units. It was rough. The men and women were overworked, but you know what? They still came here, did their job, even if they had to do double shifts, take on extra roles, and it was paramount to everybody that we went through that storm. And through that process, when we were with COVID and everything else, we had to figure out what we're going to do now and how we're going to do it better, because the old process of trying to recruit and hire people was anywhere from a 9-month to a year process. And we're like, what can we do better to make us attractive? And I think in law enforcement in general is we don't highlight the good things we do. We don't advertise ourselves. And one of these things doing this podcast and highlighting what we're doing here is one of those things of no, this is what makes us better. We need to recruit, whether you're a person wanting that career in law enforcement or you're already sworn and you want to lateral over or transfer over. We try to, it's basically, real life recruiting instead of just saying you're doing it, but we're actually doing it.
Yeah.
And proud to say, and we're back up to pretty much full strength right now.
Wow.
And, we got the support of our mayor and city council to actually add more officers where we're at right now. And I think it's a great thing. It's a great environment, and the support we're getting is huge. So it's definitely paid off on how we've adapted to what we're doing now.
Yeah. And I'm sure the way you talk about the work will be a theme throughout our conversation. Well, I'm curious, when you were down at that, 200 positions out of 240, like, was that primarily in kind of frontline patrol officers? Was it kind of every level of the organization, or was it, just maybe in just those entry level and kind of, patrol kind of positions?
Oh, it was everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and this was where I can speak of myself, taking on more roles, but our detective bureau had to take on more roles, and
Mm.
this is where, and same thing with our patrol, low numbers, meeting, minimum staffing.
Yeah.
It was rough where we'd have to take the other shifts, or if somebody was off, had to take a second shift on their day off. But we weathered that storm, and we did what we have to do, and I think that's paramount to the men and women here, like
Yeah.
how do I say? I'm just gonna be honest. It sucked, but
Yeah.
we had to get the job done. We have to, protect, the city of South Bend, the people in our community, and we took that oath to do it, and I think we did it very well. But it does help. I'm not gonna lie. Having that extra manpower,
Mm-hmm.
the opportunity to give different promotions and specialty units, adding to that has definitely boost morale and productivity here at the PD.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure. Well, and not to belabor where you guys were before, but like that can have a reinforcing effect on organizations where you're down staff. So, folks have to cover shifts and work more overtime, and that burns people out, and they end up leaving too. So like, finding that correction and getting to where you guys are at now, that's a huge win to kind of pull out of that. Um, so, really wanted to talk with y'all about how you've expedited your hiring process. And so I think originally I read a social media post about how you guys have streamlined some of this. So, again, to kind of maybe start with what it was before. So if I was a potential new officer wanting to work for the city of South Bend, what was that hiring and onboarding process like before? Like how long would it take? What were the different stages that folks would go through kind of before you guys started making improvements?
I think it was just pretty much standard, like here in Indiana. But for us, you put your application in whenever that testing phase or that pool would close. Everybody would get invited to a physical test. If you passed that, it would be like anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks before you would do. You would know about the written test. You would take the written test, and then it would be weeks after that. You would then have to go. It wasn't smooth. It was
Hmm.
just so planned out where the waiting game was agonizing. And I think now about 16, 17 years ago, just thinking how long it was, waiting to get a phone call or
Yeah.
a piece of paper in the mail. It was aggravating, and we just couldn't do that anymore. It was just so slow that it's almost kind of, and I hate to say this, how law enforcement was, and kind of what
Mm.
we did about to advertise ourselves is, why change it? If it's not broke, why change? And I think that's the hugest thing is sometimes in our career field, change is a four-letter word, and sometimes you just got to embrace it and try something new. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, hey, guess what? We learned something from it. So that's a huge thing. It just took forever, and I think nowadays, you have your smartphone, you can go on the internet, whatever, you can get instant results or instant notifications just, with a click of a button. And I think that's how we have to change ourselves as well in hiring. And that's kind of where we went to our prospect day and where we're going to stick to that from now on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think local government is known for long recruitment timelines generally, let alone for I think most folks would recognize police and those public safety positions takes even longer than maybe the average position. So yeah, you guys are probably aren't alone in having that kind of long delay in that hiring process. And I'm curious, those delays as folks are kind of waiting to hear back about each stage, was that just, hey, past practice, or was it like, we got to wait for, the state to look at these applications and do X, Y, and Z before we can contact folks? Or what were some of those delays like as you kind of looked at them, were they just things that you could control, or were they things outside of the department's control?
I think it was just, kind of like it's just how it was done, why
Yeah.
change?
Yeah.
And I think just from just, we finally getting people in like different positions who wasn't afraid to come up with an idea to try something new. And I hate to say it, when we got so short, with manpower around 200 officers,
Hmm.
you kind of, you get that you're back against the wall. It's kind of that fight or flight. And, we have to make a decision and try some stuff. And luckily it worked out for us.
Yeah. So, what was the approach that the department took to be like, hey, we need to get some bodies, we need to get some people in the door here. So how did you guys look at the process and identify, ways to make things change? And I know we're going to talk about prospect days, but I'm wondering, what it took to kind of review that process and identify ways, the changes that you ended up making.
I think we just have to make it quicker, more,
Mm-hmm.
being more efficient, figuring out, what are the drawbacks on, you know, to become an officer. And I think is trying to break down those barriers as much as possible to make it easier, because not only, are we having that issue, but all around us, especially in Indiana, Southwest Michigan, or even in the Midwest or countrywide, uh, every department needs officers. And I
Yeah.
think, what can we make it where if someone is debating on whether to come to South Bend or another agency, what can we do to make it that much quicker, that much easier, so they can have a decision to come to us? And I think it
Yeah.
was a whole standpoint on, what do we have to offer that other PDs don't? And I think that's where we started advertising better, recruiting better from the officers within to try and find applicants, our social media. I think it was all around. It wasn't just changing the process. It was
Mm-hmm.
almost changing the culture here, where we all had to be on the same page and actually realize, basically look ourselves in the mirror. What do we do well and what can we offer people? And let's highlight that and move forward. I think it was just too many people involved, but we had a couple officers that had this idea of moving forward with Prospect Day, and it kind of culminated with all of that. And we've been, as you can see in what we've talked about, we've had great success with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about prospect day. What is that? Like, what are the things that go into that, and what would like an applicant going through that kind of experience?
It sounds easy when we call it our Prospect Day hiring event, but it's a 1 day police testing event here for South Bend PD. And it's pretty much, we knock out 80% of the testing process in 1 day.
Mm.
So that gives a prospective applicant, or, somebody who's a, lateral officer looking to, to make a new change in another department. You pretty much know where you're going to stand after that, pretty much full day of testing, whether you're going to make it or not. And that's what gives people, how do I say, hope or a chance, or they can
Mm.
plan their lives around that, whether they got,
Yeah.
young kids, if they got to move, if they, got to change jobs. I think that waiting game, we've tried to take as much time of that away as possible. So literally in 1 day, we're going to knock out your physical agility test, your written test, your personal interview, your oral boards, knocking out your fingerprints, scheduling your medical and psychological evaluations, meeting with your background investigator, and literally getting everything set up. So there's only a few more steps after that day of whether you're potentially going to get hired with us or not. And I think that just gives, it makes it easier for us in the PDY, saying, hey, we know where we're going to be standing at with this hiring pool after today, pretty much. And it, planning administrative wise, it's on both ends. It makes it so much easier for us to plan ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're knocking out a bunch of them rather than doing one or two applicants over the course of a few weeks or something like that. Yeah. Um, so I'm curious, what does a day like that look like? Is it everybody's at a gym to do the physical and then, or the physical test, and then, or how do you guys kind of have it set up to like, and how many folks are coming through in a typical prospect day?
It was definitely, the first one was definitely, we didn't know what to expect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it takes a lot of manpower. So we're having a lot of officers and staff who are here on their day off to come and do this, where I think it takes, anywhere from 30 to 40 officers to put this on, to knock out all these tests. So we're not cutting any corners on this. And I think that's one thing to highlight is, no, it's a full testing. We're just knocking it out in 1 day.
Mm.
And, we got everything set up. It runs smooth. But this is where, just the dedication of the men and women here about it. But hey, it starts at 8 a.m. We start with the physical test. Hey, if you pass, you keep moving on, and if you don't, you're out. But I think it's just we got everything so streamlined. We almost take it for granted now. Everybody
Yeah.
knows their positions. Everybody knows their roles. This is how we do things, and it just runs smooth for the most part. And it's a nice experience, and it's another way to talk to the applicants, and for the applicants to kind of get to know the officers there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, on the staff side, like how many of your team or of the department, staff does it take to kind of run a typical prospect day?
Oh, like I said, we're probably about 30 or 40 officers,
Oh, wow.
and staff wise to actually make this happen
Oh my gosh.
in that one day event. And then afterwards, we have, different background investigators and different things that we have our own training and recruiting bureau that kind of heads it all up. But yeah, that day it takes about a good 30 to 40 people to make it run. And that's where, when we talk to other agencies to do that, is we realize, hey, we're going to have to, give officers, overtime to do this, because we're going to need the manpower to handle it. Because there's been anywhere from 50 to, potentially around 100 applicants who
Oh
come
my
to these
gosh.
prospect days when we have them. And that's a lot to get through.
Yeah.
And you got to have the staff. You got to have the position. We host it at the South Bend Police Department. Luckily, we have a great facility, a training room, different areas with that. So we have literally the whole building set up. We got our detective bureau. We got our, SFU room. We have our administrative. We have different offices all around where those Saturdays for Prospect Day, everything's full. It's a well-oiled machine for sure.
Wow. Wow. I mean, 50 or 100. No wonder you need somebody staffed just for it. That's a ton of applicants. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something, to make it safe, but
Yeah.
hey, we're strict on it, and we're not cutting any corners. And it's definitely a great show to how the department comes together to make this run.
Yeah. So it makes sense that you start with kind of the physical test as the first thing in the morning. And then, so the folks that pass that, are you kind of doing the other portions at the same time, where they might kind of go from station to station or I'm imagining this like a youth basketball tryouts or something, but that's probably not quite visioning it right. But
Yeah, a little bit. But yeah, we knock out one portion at a time. So
okay.
if for example, we got 100 people, we're going to knock out the physical test. As soon as we're done with that, hey, everybody gets a rest, and then we start like the written portion of it. There's a study
Okay.
time, just how it is. And then, the testing time with it. So we give all the applicants, the perfect opportunity with that. And it's basically, hey, you pass this first step, you're off to the second. Pass the
Yeah.
second, you're off to the third, so on and so forth. So it's definitely, it's not an easy day, I will say
No.
that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely gets to show, those individuals who want to become an officer. It's like another test in itself to, hey, how well do you handle stress? How well do you handle time management? And I think that you can show that, you can see that in the men and women that have applied. Okay, they look like they can handle themselves, because it is a stressful day doing all of that in one day.
Yeah.
And it just helps with that mental preparation. What type of person are they? If they're willing to do this, it makes it that much easier for us to see what kind of applicants we're getting.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. The day in itself is part of the testing. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So, an applicant that goes through everything that you have on a prospect day, you said to starting at 8 a.m. Are they, typically out by, 5 p.m.? Is it a full work day, or is it longer? Like,
Oh, it's a full work day. I
yeah.
think one of them, I got out of there like at 5 or 6. But we have other staff that are still going there because they, got to process the paperwork and everything.
Yep.
But yeah, it's definitely a full day on us. But if you are an applicant, expect pretty much a full 8-hour day.
Yeah.
There to knock everything out.
Yeah. They got to put in the work, right?
Absolutely. But you know what? If I had that opportunity 16, 17 years ago when I applied to do pretty much everything in one day, it would have made that 6 to 9 months where of that waiting process and doing everything. Yeah, because the patience for it, and that the what ifs, you pretty much know after that one day. That's where it's nice, and
Yeah.
the way we got it going on.
Yeah. Way better. Yeah. I totally agree. Way better than waiting, extending that wait 6 to 9 months. So I'm curious. You've said a couple times that at the end of that day, if you've gotten through everything, you pretty much know. So what's kind of left to do once an applicant's completed that prospect day? What's kind of left for them to do to kind of finish, going from, hey, an applicant to you're on board as one of our new recruits?
Yeah, pretty much. It's kind of like your background investigation, where that's going to take time to do that. So,
Yeah.
answering questions, speaking with the background investigator, figuring out, hey, some of the previous interviews and questionnaires that you filled out, hey, are you being truthful with us? You know what I mean? Are you giving the accurate information? This is trying to, let's really focus on this individual, who they are, and what they're all about. And then while that's going on, getting through like the pension side, right, through the state, right?
Mm.
So if you're eligible for, the pension, the psychological exam, and then also, our voice stress. Here we don't do the polygraph.
Mm-hmm.
Some departments still, do a polygraph test. We do the voice stress test for that. And those are the things that need to be finished. And once you pass all of those, you're pretty much good to go.
Mm-hmm.
To become, an officer here at South Bend. So not too much longer after that prospect day, pretty much about a month after that, depending on how many we have and, how the process goes. Pretty much, like I would say, a couple weeks to a month after that, you should pretty much know where you're at, whether you're good to go as, going to be hired or not.
Wow. Yeah. So that's a huge change then, from 6 to 9 month process from prospect day to knowing, a couple weeks to a month. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it just makes it so much easier,
Yeah. Oh
because
my
where
gosh.
we've had it, where officers would leave to another department
Yeah.
because, let's say, because they were that much farther in another process, or let's say they found another job, or that let's say they had a change of heart, or something like that. This is where, knowing your plan within the next, month or two, uh, gives us an advantage over other agencies.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And that's these folks, once they've completed the process, this is to go into the like you guys' academy, or is there like, entry level officers kind of, training on the job at that point?
Yeah, so we pretty much getting forward with if you get hired on, depending on the when the actual next academy is scheduled. We
Mhm.
have certain things where, hey, you may come in and do like administrative work, clerical work, some training before the academy, or everything just depends going forward with that.
Yeah.
And then once you go, you attend the academy. Once you come back, then you start your training in house, as an officer before you start your field training program, in patrol.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. That's awesome. And so I think you referenced you've done a couple of these so far. So how many prospect days have you done? Like what's been, the success, I guess, of it so far? Like, I'm just curious on like how do you guys feel like it sounds like you're going to keep doing it, so it must be working. But I'm just curious how many you've done. Have you changed them at all as you've gone kind of prospect day to prospect day?
I believe this is going to be either the fifth or sixth one, and don't quote me on that. But pretty much how we're going to do our hiring is this is going to be standard
Yeah.
with that, kind of coinciding when the academies start.
Mm.
Is when we kind of are doing so we're going to make sure all the paperwork is done before those academy starts. So we're going to do, anywhere from like from now on, like 2 to 3 prospect days a year, especially coinciding with our prospect or going to the academy. So with
Yeah.
that, and then moving forward, and this is something I also want to mention, especially about with lateral officers, whether they're already sworn in Indiana or from other states. This is where we also kind of been, showing that initiative where we don't have like a pool for them. So
Mm.
if you're a lateral and you apply with us, is basically on your schedule. Hey, if you can knock it out and do it here, uh, we've pretty much make accommodations for them because, hey, this officer already has the qualifications, already has a training, where we can actually do that. We rearrange our schedules for them because we
Mm.
know, hey, we have to show. It's just another advertising, tool to get them in the door. Where we'll drop what we're doing, we'll test you and get you going through that process quicker instead of having to wait.
Mm.
But that's another thing we kind of do, where it's almost like if you're already a lateral officer, already sworn, your prospect day could technically be any day,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Okay. So someone brand new to the field, it's going to be days 2 or 3 times a year based on when, so you guys can time it with the academy. And then for laterals, it's, hey, we'll do it whenever you want. We want you here.
Yep, yeah, and that's one of those things where even if you're local or out of state, where okay, what works for you, and
Yeah.
kind of working with them, not shortening the process, but hey, if you want to come over here, we'll make exceptions for you, being already sworn, because that saves us time, and if we can get officers on the street quicker, hey, that
Yeah.
that that means we can create more positions, whether in patrol, detective bureau, specialty units, and I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it sounds like from the way you've kind of talked about what goes into each of these processes that you didn't change your standards at all, or the things that it takes to become, a police officer in South Bend. It's just that you guys said these are the aspects that we have control over are how long this takes. So let's condense it down. Is that right?
Yeah, it's pretty much like how we almost one of those things kind of I think where it originally started with some individuals in our training bureau was like it's like almost like an NFL combine,
Yeah.
getting all the
Yeah.
tests out in one day. Kind of we see our applicants, we see potential the pool of individuals and kind of go from there. But that is almost the best way to actually look at it. Is giving examples, almost like an NFL combine, kind of like it's our own draft per
Yeah.
se.
That's better than youth basketball practice, which is what the analogy I reach for. So
Yeah,
or
yeah,
tryouts.
similar, but yeah.
That's funny. No, I like that. That's yeah, and I think I know when I've talked to other folks in public safety or in policing, like talking about changing their recruitment process, it's almost like they don't want to lower their standards, right? That's what I think folks hear when they talk about like streamlining or expediting processes. But what you guys have just done is say, let's a process, it's all the same. It's the same requirements as it was last, 16 years ago, but we're just going to make it a lot faster. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Let's. How can we be more efficient? Knock it
Yeah.
out and give us an edge over our. I hate to say it, our competitors,
Yeah.
our other brothers and sisters in blue.
Yeah. What I'm curious, you guys are probably in touch with those neighboring departments. How have they kind of reacted to you guys doing this? Are they now going to push to do their own prospect days, or are they they looking at their process too?
I don't know. I haven't been in contact with them. I think we're pretty tight knit over in our agency, in our
Yeah.
area, on how they do stuff. But we always try and work on what we're doing and works for us, because it may
Yeah.
not work for another agency, and that's where we've come to realize, like, hey, this is how we do things, and we're not going to hold it against. If an agency wants to figure out what we're doing, hey, this is what we're doing. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, or if you don't want to try it, but we try to focus on what's going to make us, what's best for us. And
Yeah.
if that gives somebody an example or an idea to do something for their agency, more power to them. And if there's somebody doing something out there that an agency is doing well, trust me, we're going to try and do that over here as well. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just trying to make a better wheel, sort of
Yeah.
say.
I like it. I like it. One of the things that I've heard you reference a couple times is almost and I think you said it was changing the culture around the way you guys talk about your work and the way you do recruitment. So, I'm curious, like, how did you guys think about think about that as a department where, like, hey, we want to change how we talk about this. We want to do more communication about our work and like you said before, the positive pieces of it. Was that like I don't know, was there a strategy around that where everybody kind of got together and figured out this messaging or the way you wanted to kind of strategize, or was it more hidden? As we make prospect days and as we make this recruitment process more streamlined, that's going to force us to change the way we talk about it too.
I think we tried it once, that first prospect day, and we
Mm-hmm.
had such a success with it, and positive vibes from it, that like, okay, cool, let's keep doing this. And I think it's just what can we grow from it, and what can we add, to change little tweaks. But yeah, there's plenty, the whole process, some is government work, so there's always going to be meetings and got to get approval. So it's always the boring stuff that no one wants to hear about, behind the scenes. But
Yeah.
I think culturally here at the department several years ago, we made a structure change on how this department structured, on creating the different divisions and what is under each division. And I think just a huge thing on how we tackle gun and gang violence here in South Bend. We identify it as through GBI, Group Violence Intervention. But we're used to, how do I say, problem solving, talking about issues, trying to figure out ways, using data, intelligence, technology, and working with others, whether it's other law enforcement, community, social service agencies. So we're already kind of used to all that even before we did this prospect day. So we're always, command staff, we meet every Tuesday morning. Every Thursday, we host a multi-jurisdictional intelligence and data sharing meeting that involves, Northern Indiana and Southwest Michigan. So we're kind of always on the cusp of figuring out stuff. And Prospect Day is just one of those things that, from that culture change has, our officers, are empowered to come up with these ideas and try something new. And that's what's kind of cool over here is um, supporting, the men and women. And I think that's what Prospect Day came from, is literally an idea from our officers. What do we need? How do we do this? And, supporting them to on this idea and concept. And now it's reality. And now it's standard operating procedure here at SBPD on how we recruit officers.
Yeah. Are there any other changes around recruitment, or how you get in front of potential applicants, that you guys have made as part of this?
I think social media is huge. We have
Yeah.
a great PIO media liaison. She's great, but anyway, I think that's just being proactive.
Yeah.
Posting great stories about the proactive policing. Whether it's arrest or cases being investigated and solved. Utilizing technology, being out in the media, always kind of showing. So it's like that subliminal effect where you always hear South Bend PD in the news or in social media, or when you're scrolling through your phone, you always get something from them. And I think that's just a huge thing where we always try to identify what we have. We have our own in-house crime lab. We
Mm-hmm.
have, two in-house gyms at the PD, for our officers. We have a real-time crime center. We have, different, specialty units, different equipment, gear, where we try and highlight that as recruiting tools. And I think that's what most PDs don't do, is highlight what they have and currently do. Instead of just, people should ask us. No, we have to highlight ourselves and
Mm.
tell the community what we're doing, what we have, how we're doing it. And I think that is a great way on how we project ourselves, because we have to advertise ourselves. And I think I'll just be honest, some don't do a good job. And
Yeah.
social media, I hate is to say, is for free. Doing a podcast like this is great. Being on LinkedIn, talking with your news, the media, even though some law enforcement don't like the media, local media or whatever, use them. Give them the stories. Don't hide anything. Be transparent.
Mm.
With the events going on in your community. But I think that's one of those things where we're always trying to be out there, and we just don't stop. And if no one wants to cover it, we're going to highlight ourselves, and we don't shy away from it.
Yeah. Was that a pretty, from other police departments that I've worked with, I could see that being a fairly large, cultural shift to go from, to open up and talk more about the work and be more proactive and communicate, even when the news media doesn't want to cover you. So was that a pretty big, shift for South Bend?
Yes and no. We're always in the news because we're, pretty much the biggest agency in our area. We have a lot of local news media outlets here. But I think that's just the culture here.
Yeah.
I've been, having to talk to the media, whether in person or not, but it's not afraid to have those conversations. And I think that
Mm.
is huge, where, if it happened, it happened. Why hide it? Pretty much the streets are going to know everything anyways. And I think that's as long as you're upfront with it, and not saying we control the narrative, but to the same sense, like, we know the truth more times than not. So let's put it out there of what actually happened, what we're actually doing, instead of letting others make the story for us.
Yeah.
And I think that's just being out there in front and tackling issues head on, and not being afraid to also stand up for, um, you know, our department in general. And I think that's we have a great command staff that does that day in and day out, and it translates to the work that's being done here every day.
Yeah. No, well said. Well, I imagine that means you've got folks throughout the department that are doing that communicating. It's not just your PIO or you, right? You have to have folks that feel comfortable, talking to people throughout the organization.
Yep, absolutely. Whether it's
Yeah.
a detective, patrol officer, wherever you go in a community meeting, off duty, even if it's the PD posts something and you share it on your Facebook or Instagram or
Mm.
whatever, you're playing your role, you're advertising, you're showing what South Bend PD is and what it can be for you. So
Yeah. So you referenced you know engaging with your current officers as well. So is there it sounded like prospect days might have been an idea that came from folks, but I'm curious, is there anything you guys are doing around retention where, hey, we want to bring in new folks to the organization to fill vacancies and make sure you have the people you need to serve the community, but there's also a need to kind of retain the folks you have. So have you guys been doing anything around retention that the other organizations can copy and learn from?
and I think that's just a huge thing is especially technology and equipment, right?
Yeah.
Cops want cool tools. They want all the, the best stuff. So we have, some things for officers, we try and get all new equipment, new cars. We're training all the time, whether it's going to the range, defensive tactics, emergency vehicle operations, et cetera, whether it's online training, on-demand training or in person. We have that, we have our own crime lab. We almost take for granted how quick what we have here, our own records department that does certain things for officers where those officers don't have to. Our crime lab does certain things, that our officers don't have to. But we also, like our real-time crime center, utilizing gunshot technology, camera, registry and integration to, identify crimes in progress. Officers in their car can watch surveillance cameras, city-owned cameras and partnered up businesses to, they're on their way to a call and they can see, the crime, occurring in the area, to whether they can see a suspect, in it or not. License plate readers. I could go on and on, but I think that's the key thing is giving the officers what they need, within reason, for the most part, but giving them what they need to be the best, the most efficient and effective, but so they can go home at each night, to their families. And if the officers, if morale is bad and they don't feel like they're being supported, how much are they actually going to do their job to the fullest? And I think that's one of those things, or a quote, I forget who said it, but, the customer's not always right. It's the employees that need to be taken care of. And I think that's a huge thing, because if the employees are taken care of, they're going to take care of the customers. And that's one of the things we can't make everybody happy, but for the most part, everybody here is given the tools they need. And that's something we just need to highlight. And that's what, a lot of the things we do here through our social media and through our local media as well, is highlighting what we have and what we actually do with it.
So it's almost just kind of highlighting what you said there. There's almost like a twofold, benefit from it, where you're staying on the cutting edge. So you make the jobs of your current police officers easier. And that also attracts folks to the organization, because you're doing kind of these cutting edge and, industry leading practices. So that's a, great reasons to do, to kind of, embrace new things and embrace innovation and technology.
Oh, absolutely. And plus, we have a very good working relationship with our administration and city officials, but also with our FOP, and bringing the best wage and benefit package to our officers. And I think that's is bringing a highlight. Our current contract, where we started at, almost kind of set the standard for area departments on what they needed to do for their retention and recruiting as well. So we're always trying to be the tip of the spear for our area, and kind of not only technology, what we're doing, but also for, wage and benefits as well for our men and women.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. That's really, really great to hear. And you guys are a real success story, I think, kind of across the country. I know from, the organizations that I've worked with, where, not a lot of police departments can say they're close to, to fully staffed right now. So, you've mentioned, using prospect days to kind of fill those vacancies and doing some efforts to retain the folks you have. I'm curious, are you guys doing any succession planning? Are you guys facing some retirements coming that you need to plan for? Are you guys doing any of that as well?
Oh, and I think it's almost like a running, a tally of like, hey, who's leaving, knowing people, right, with retirements. But you also got to plan for those what ifs, hey, did somebody get a new job? Is, somebody burnt out, or did somebody have to move because of family, or did they hit the lottery, so you always have to play for that, where, the main foundation is patrol. All right. We need X amount of officers on each of these shifts. Okay. We're at a good spot. So I think it's always thinking about that instead of waiting for
Mhm.
that day to happen. Because I've heard, from some other horror stories from agencies where not having that succession plan is brutal. And I
Yeah.
think that sometimes we overthink it, but it's so ingrained now of what we do here. I'll be honest, we almost take it for granted.
Yeah.
And kind of like doing these podcasts or these conversations, you almost realize, nah, we kind of do that all the time. Okay, this person's retiring in 3 months. We need to have this done. Or, hey, we got X amount of people now. Once we reach to this level, we're comfortable to do a promotion or add a person to this specialty unit or whatever. So it's pretty much done daily, if not weekly, on those type of plans with that.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Well, and I mean, similar to kind of recruitment, it sounds like keeping that as part of your regular communication, your regular conversations and planning, like that. I think that's a good takeaway for organizations that like, hey, you gotta work this into like something you're thinking about all the time rather than just something you do once and forget about or think about once a year.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, hey, for example, this podcast, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
how many times I'm sure you've been into positions where you reached out and like, hey, I want to do a story, and you don't get a reply back, or they say no, right?
yeah, yeah.
Hey, I was contacted. Hey, let's do this because deep down, this is a good thing to not only highlight our agency but law enforcement in general, right? Any
Hmm.
type of good press that policing can do, you should do it, not only for your agency but for the profession as a whole. And that's kind of the way I look at it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, well said. That's really great. So I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. Are there other ways that or other things you want to highlight about the work of the South Bend Police Department where you guys are trying to set yourself apart from other police departments?
It's one of those things where kind of what we do is, we work with a lot of different agencies, whether it's through our group violence intervention,
Hmm.
kind of the focused deterrent ceasefire. Anyway, for the way we do things on trying to either prevent or enforce gun and gang violence in our community, looking at different ways on working with different agencies. We're pretty big on communicating, and I think that's something lacking in law enforcement is
Mm.
working with other agencies. Granted, we're not always going to get along, and there's going to be like that sibling rivalry to an extent, but for the most part we communicate very well, even with our prosecutor's office, our local, state, and federal partners. That is a thing that we try and do a lot, and we, like I said, we meet every Thursday on that. And I
Hmm.
think that's one of these things where as soon as technology happens, we try to embrace it. uh, it's just one of those things where we try to do a lot of things here. And to highlight one thing, I would just say we're never afraid to change, and we're never
Yeah,
afraid to improve. We don't always get it right, but we're not afraid to take on something new or try something new. And I think if more agencies did that and break out of that mold of, hey, that's how we always done it, I think more success would come that way. And the community is going to see it. I
yeah,
mean, we do events all around. We've did just small, like back to school and end of school cookouts, and we're seeing 400, 500 people show up to a police event. We have a yearly thing we've done for several years now. It's kind of like a Halloween thing, where community events. We're at our South Bend Cubs at Four Winds Field. Um, and affiliate, with the Chicago Cubs,
hmm,
and we're pretty much handling, candy giveaway with 100 plus different vendors, and pretty much handling 7,000 plus people in the community getting free candy, community event. So I think it's one of those things where you put yourself out there, and you're going to get a great response from the community. And I think
yeah,
more law enforcement should highlight, because there's more people that support law enforcement than hate it.
yeah.
And I think soon as we embrace the ones that how do I say, love and want us, I think that will make it so much better instead of it thinking everybody's out to get us.
Yeah. Well, and I think just to underline something you said, I think the embracing change, like you're very modest about it, but like that's a pretty big cultural shift, I would say, from other departments or other folks in police that I've talked
Oh,
to.
I mean,
Like
you never,
getting to a point where,
you're never going to get people to check their email every day or
yeah,
voicemail,
yeah,
but I mean, it's just the little things. Think of, every little battle's a win. If
yeah,
it's a little thing to do it. And I think that's one of those things where it's definitely a cultural shift. You're not going to get it in, day one or the first
yeah,
time, but as soon as more people start seeing, success from it, something in a positive light, it will catch on, hopefully. But just don't stop, right? Have patience, have, perseverance with it, because it's easy to give up. And trust me, there's times when we've done stuff here where we just want to give up and say, forget it, but we're still doing it. And it goes for a lot of things here at the PD.
Yeah. Well said. Well, that's awesome. I feel like we've learned a ton from you, and that's probably a good place to end it. So our traditional last question on the podcast is, if you could be the GovLove DJ and pick the exit music for this episode, what song would you pick?
Oh man, there's so many. I think if we're gonna end this song, I think hey, just the instrumental, maybe like a Metallica "Fade to Black."
Okay.
Kind of going out, just doing that. We'll just do some instrumental, starting slow in the background, and then as soon as just fade out pretty easily. I think we just do that. Some rock instrumental. We'll do that.
Perfect. I wondered if we were gonna hear from Metallica again once.
Oh, you got to go old school. I don't know about some of the new stuff, but hey, definitely the older stuff is key.
Awesome. Well, that ends our episode for today. Lieutenant Dombrowski, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and coming on and talking about all the work going on in South Bend. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks, Ben, and thank you for the opportunity. And if any agency wants to reach out to the PD on kind of what we're doing here with our Prospect Day, or anything else we're doing here with GVI or Intel and data, feel free to reach out, and we can connect from there.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put we'll link to your guys' website and put your contact information in the notes for this episode too. So that's really nice. And for our listeners, GovLove is brought to you by engaging local government leaders, and the best way to support GovLove is to become an ELGL member. You can reach us online at elgl.org/GovLove, and you can give us a follow on Twitter at the handle @GovLovePodcast. And subscribe to GovLove on your favorite podcast app. If you're already subscribed, go tell a friend, colleague, neighbor, enemy about this podcast. Help us spread the word that GovLove is the go-to place for local government stories. And with that, thank you for listening. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.
Drifting farther every day, getting lost within.